So by now, hopefully you're comfortable with model, temperature and top P. Ebong believe me, most of the time যখন you're working with the parameters, when you're trying to integrate the power of GPT into your application, most of the time দেখা যাবে you're tweaking with either the model, the temperature or the top P. Okay? কিন্তু কখনো কখনো sometimes we also have to use some of these other parameters. Okay? So চলুন দেখে নেওয়া যাক what each of these other parameters they mean. Okay? So let us start with this one. Okay? Maximum length. এবং maximum length বোঝার আগে চলুন দেখে নেওয়া যাক what a token is. Okay? যখন আমরা টেম্পারেচার এবং টপ পি পড়ছিলাম আমরা বলেছিলাম our models in reality they actually work with tokens and not words. Okay? And a token is nothing but a part of a word. Okay? One token roughly equals to 3/4 of a word. Okay? অর্থাৎ একটা টোকেন একটা শব্দ থেকে কিছুটা ছোট, right? Another way to say is 100 tokens will be equal to 75 words. Okay? And you should also remember one token roughly equals to 4 characters. Okay? If you notice at the very bottom we have this counter যেখানে right now it's showing 0. So 0 tokens in prompt. এর অর্থ কি? এর অর্থ হলো আমাদের prompt, right? This area, this box, it has 0 tokens. কারণ আমরা কিছুই লিখিনি, right? So যেমনটা বললাম roughly 4 characters it equals to 1 token, right? So আমি যদি এখানে if I put 4 characters, say I write 4, it has 4 characters, right? You see the number of token is now 1. As I add more characters, you'll see the number of tokens it actually increases. Okay? So if I add more characters, you see the number of tokens is now 7. Also the number of words it's actually 5. So consider this particular prompt. Okay? A very interesting story about an alien who crashed into the earth and he's stuck forever. So তাকে তার নিউ লাইফ অ্যাডজাস্ট করতে হবে অ্যাকর্ডিং টু আর্থ অ্যান্ড টু সার্ভাইভ হি হ্যাজ টু ডিসগাইজ হিমসেলফ অ্যাজ এ হিউম্যান এখন সে জানতে চায় হাউ হি ক্যান ডিসগাইজ হিমসেলফ উইথ হিজ 2 heads, 3 eyes, 4 arms and this many legs. Okay? So যদি আপনি নোটিস করেন this particular prompt it actually took up to 74 tokens. Okay? And this is where maximum length comes into play. Maximum length it basically specifies the maximum number of tokens allowed in the model's response. Okay? আমাদের মডেলকে আমরা এই প্রম্পটটি দিয়েছি এবং আমাদের মডেল it would generate some output, right? Let us see the output. If I click submit, wow, it actually generated a list of things this Mr. Alien can do to disguise himself. Okay? GPT bolche to wear disguises, to use prosthetics, maybe get a plastic surgery, practice human behaviors and all that stuff. Okay? But what I want you to know, age a particular response highlighted in green background, how many tokens are in this response? Jodi ami amar prompt ti remove kore dei and I only keep the model's response, right? So this entire thing is basically the output and how many tokens are in this output? 217. Okay? And this is exactly what maximum length does. সে বলে দিচ্ছে মডেলকে সে স্পেসিফাই করে দিচ্ছে the output you generate it should not be more than 256 এবং আমাদের মডেল it actually follows the rule. The total number of tokens in this response it is what? 217, which is less than 256. Okay? What if I reduce the value to a very low value, say 10, and now for the same prompt let's see what our model has to offer. Okay? You see যখন আমরা স্পেসিফাই করেছি the maximum allowed tokens in the model's response, it can only be up to 10, the model সে কিন্তু আমার prompt request complete করতে পারেনি, right? How many tokens are in this response? If I remove my prompt, আমি দেখতে পাচ্ছি the total number of tokens in this output is actually 8, again which is less than the maximum length. So to follow this rule, আমাদের model DaVinci, it could not complete my prompt. Okay, so you have to set this maximum length in such a way so that আমাদের model it can complete its output, right? If the output it's very lengthy, it needs more token, then you have to increase the maximum length. যদি আমাদের model it does not need that many tokens, then it's better to keep it at a low value. Okay, then what about this stop sequence? Okay, so stop sequence হলো ওই সকল শব্দ which if specified right here, আমাদের model যখন সে আমাদের প্রম্পটের আউটপুট জেনারেট করছে, সে যদি দেখে if it encounters that particular word in its response, it will immediately stop generating further output. Okay, for example, consider this particular prompt. যদি আমি আমার মডেলকে জিজ্ঞেস করি what's the capital of Bangladesh, এবং if I put the stop sequence as say Dhaka. Okay, so what should be the expected output, right? So without stop sequence, the output should be something like the capital of Bangladesh is Dhaka, right? But যেহেতু আমরা আমাদের stop sequence specify করেছি as Dhaka, the model when it's generating the output say the capital of Bangladesh is ঠিক এর পরের শব্দ যখনই সে দেখবে ঢাকা, it will immediately stop generating the output. Okay, let's see for ourselves. If I submit, so just as I said, okay, আমাদের model সে জানতো the immediate word after is going to be what? Dhaka. Before generating the output, আমাদের model সে জানতো the next word it's looking at is Dhaka, right? It immediately stops generating further output. Okay, what if instead of Dhaka, say আমি specify করছি as stop sequence say the word Bangladesh. Okay, if this is my stop sequence, then আমাদের model it should generate only output up to this point, right? So let's see if that is actually the case. So I copy Bangladesh, I remove Dhaka, and I put Bangladesh as my stop sequence. Okay, so let's remove this output, and if I submit again, you see the output is not exactly the same, but যদি আপনি notice করেন it was actually trying to say Bangladesh. It would have said Bangladesh right after this token off, right? So because of this stop sequence Bangladesh, it actually stopped generating further output. Okay, so after stop sequences we have top P যেটা আপনি already জানেন. Then we can see two more parameters, frequency penalty and presence penalty. A particular দুটো parameter, they are somewhat similar to temperature and top P. It can control diversity to some extent. For example, frequency penalty, if you increase the value of frequency penalty to a higher value, then আমাদের model it actually tries to come up with new words, new tokens. Okay, যখন আমাদের model সে দেখবে when it's generating the response on the fly, it will see if some words it has already used in its response, then it will try to come up with new words or token that it has not mentioned in the initial part of its completion. Okay, and the same goes for presence penalty. Okay, যদি আপনি presence penalty value বাড়িয়ে দেন, then the model it tends to talk about new topics. Okay, so basically এই দুটো parameter they try to make the model less repetitive. Okay, it pushes the model to come up with new tokens, new words and new topics. Okay, so let's see for this particular prompt with a very low value, say both parameters set to 0. Let's see what our model has to say. Okay, good enough, right? But can we do better? আমরা কি এই পার্টিকুলার রেসপন্সকে আমরা কি একে আরো বেশি ইনোভেটিভ করতে পারি না? Let's see. If I increase the value to say presence penalty 1, then frequency penalty say 1 as well. Okay, এবং এখন যদি আমি ask this prompt, then let's see what our model has to offer. Okay, so যদি আপনি notice করেন compared to the previous response, a particular response is actually a bit more variant, diverse. Okay, আমাদের model, it tries to come up with new words, new tokens, and if you see আমাদের model, it actually talks about new things. The response is actually longer than before, এবং other than making facial expressions and using body language, আমাদের model, it's suggesting to raise your eyebrow, sticking out your tongue, winking, crossing your eyes, and so many other things, right? It is because of setting a high value of frequency penalty and presence penalty which pushes the model to come up with new words and new topics. Okay, after that we have best of. It's something that আমি personally খুব একটা ব্যবহার করি না. It's more of a server side thing. Typically আমাদের model যখন আপনি তাকে prompt করছেন with say this particular question, it generates only one response per prompt. Okay, it is because the best of is set to 1. It only generates one response per prompt. But if you set it to a very high value, then আমাদের model in the back end, in the server side, it will generate multiple response and will only provide you with the best response. Okay, so although on the client side, on the end user end, আপনি খুব একটা difference দেখবেন না. The model will still provide you with one single output, but in the back end, the model is actually generating multiple outputs and comparing and bringing you the best of outputs, which is actually a bit costly. Okay, we'll talk about costs in a later video. Okay, then we have start text and restart text. Okay, say we are trying to build a chatbot with our DaVinci model. Okay, এবং say আমাদের chatbot, it has to act as a doctor. Okay, and it has to provide reasonable treatment to the patients. Okay, and how will a typical chat session between a doctor and a patient look like? Let's see. So let's say আমি একজন patient and I have a sore throat. I think I caught a cold, so আমি ডক্টরকে জিজ্ঞেস করছি what should I do? So I want my model to act as a doctor, so I prompt my model to provide the response as a doctor. Okay, so I add this prefix of a doctor, and before submitting, let's restore the values of these parameters to their default value. Okay, 0 0, this one 1. Okay, for this demonstration I don't want these parameters to affect my response. I'm interested in these two parameters. Okay, so for that reason I turn this off. Okay, and I let the others be as it is. Let's also delete the stop sequence, although I don't think it will be necessary. So back to our doctor. Let's see what our doctor has to say. Okay, before doing that, let's provide our doctor with a specific instruction. I want my doctor to keep his response to be short and concise. Okay, so now if I click submit, Okay, so somewhat good. What's funny is it's recommending me to visit my doctor when it's supposed to act as the doctor itself. Okay, so anyway, it's good to visit the real doctor. Okay, so what does these parameters start text and restart text have to do with this prompt? Okay, so যদি আপনি নোটিস করেন in this particular chat session যখনই patient কথা বলছে or basically যখন আমি কথা বলছি, whatever I say, I have to add this particular prefix of patient, right? And whenever the doctor is saying something, then we have to add the prefix doctor, right? So basically, before the model starts to respond, I always have to add this doctor prefix manually, right? I have to type it, but I want my model to do that automatically for me. Okay, so for that reason আমার মডেলকে স্পেসিফিক্যালি বলে দিতে হবে whenever you are responding, always remember to inject this particular word doctor. Okay, and at the same time আমি এটাও চাই immediately after the model it completes its instruction আমাকে কিন্তু manually I have to add this prefix patient, right, before I start to write a new message. Okay, so I have to instruct my model J not only should you add a prefix before your completion, you should also add a suffix for me. Okay, যাতে তার completionের পরে আমাকে manually I don't have to write the word patient every time. Okay, so for that I want my model to inject a restart text which is the patient. Okay, so now if I do the same thing, if I delete this prompt, so I as a patient আমি জানতে চাচ্ছি I have a sore throat, what should I do? Okay, so আমাদের model it should automatically add a doctor prefix before it starts to respond, and as soon as it completes responding, immediately after its completion it should add this particular prefix of patient. Okay, so let's see the output. Okay, you see it automatically added this prefix doctor because of the start text. Okay, এবং দেখবেন as soon as it ends the response, immediately after it actually adds this restart text which is patient. Okay, I think this patient should have been in a new line. Okay, it should have been right here. Okay, so for that reason I'll actually modify the restart text and I'll add a new line, right, just pressing enter. So if I reproduce the same thing, let's add a new line here as well. Okay, so now if I reproduce it, let's see what do I get. So the start text added, the model is generating the output, and when it's done it actually added the prefix patient at the very end. Okay, so we are successful. Finally we have this show probabilities. Okay, and there are 4 different options. I like to keep it at full spectrum. Okay, what does this mean? Before showing this, let us delete these presets. We'll try to keep the default settings. Okay, so for this particular prompt where we actually want to label the given tweet as either positive, negative, mixed or neutral. Okay, so basically sentiment analysis. Okay, so the show probability is set to full spectrum. Let's see what the model has to say. If I click submit, it says neutral. Okay, if I click the word, আপনি দেখতে পাচ্ছেন the model it picked neutral to be the label because it had the highest likelihood. Okay, so the same thing, the basic task of a large language model is to basically predict the next token, the next word. Okay, এবং আমাদের model it had these four options, right? Either positive, negative, mixed or neutral. It had to pick one sentiment এবং based on the vast amounts of data it has been trained on, আমাদের মডেল সে বলতে পারে okay, if this is my tweet, then this particular label is most likely to be neutral with more than a 99% of probability. Okay, so what if I add another tweet, say this one? Let's see what our model predicts this time. If I click submit, আমাদের model সে বলছে this tweet is actually mixed, and you see আমাদের model it was 99% confident that it was indeed a mixed opinion. Okay, so this is the benefit of setting the show probabilities to full spectrum. আপনি প্রত্যেকটি word, প্রত্যেকটি output token এর probability analyze করতে পারেন. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Now you know pretty much about all these parameters, how you can increase or decrease the values to get different answers. Hopefully by now you are comfortable with all these parameters. Okay, so thank you for bearing with me.